All right, one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Thursday morning. Happy to report no accidents on the roadway right now. Maybe that's why I got here so quickly this morning. A little bit warmer today, high of 60 with some stray showers. Tomorrow, a little cooler, high of 53 with scattered showers. And then as we get into the weekend, of course, going to be a lot colder with that wintry mix and rain and sleet on the way as well. Currently 46 in downtown Columbia here on The Game. Nine o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It is The Extra Point. It's out ahead and Jack Feltry along with you here. You know, Jack, it would help out a lot if I would plug in my headphones before turning the microphone on, because I put them on, couldn't hear anything, and realized, oh, wait, they're not plugged in.
Yeah, you might need those things. They tend to come in handy.
So now that I'm plugged in, we're off to a good start. A lot of things to get to today. We're getting closer to conference championship weekend in the NFL. Only 3 more meaningful football games. That makes me sad, Jack. That makes me very sad.
My hand's on my heart. My heart breaks. But don't we have the what are the spring football leagues? XFL or something coming up? Some nonsense like that to help fill us in.
It's the USFL now, because the UFL and the XFL combined 2 years ago now. And they're the spring league. It's one of those things that, like, when you go to like a restaurant in like March or late April, they typically have those games on, and that's kind of my extent of watching them.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great pathway for guys to have a pro career, get themselves either onto or back onto NFL rosters. We love football so much, but sometimes you need a break. Right?
Yeah.
You got to let it breathe a little bit to miss it.
Yeah, I'd rather listen to off-season football talk than that. You know, I don't know. It's just not up my alley. It's not that interesting. Yeah, I get it's football, but it's not. Just I'd rather, you got baseball on at that point. You probably have hockey, playoffs starting soon, and NBA same thing. March Madness and the Masters will be going on pretty soon. So we got plenty of sports to get us through after football season ends. But yeah, man, don't discount the Pro Bowl though. Don't discount the Pro Bowl. We got the pro football. What is it, the flag football game?
Well, now it's the Pro Bowl games, because they have like the skills competition, which, like, I won't lie, I watch some of that. It's different. It can be entertaining. I am glad that for the actual Pro Bowl itself, we stopped pretending like that was an actual football game. And not that I was like a watcher of it anyway, but it's like, when you tuned in, it was laughable that these guys are out there pretending to tackle each other, and the final score is 75-70. So flag football is more apt to what that game should be, and they still pull in millions of viewers because we just love football that much.
Just miss the days of Sean Taylor in Hawaii just laying hits on everybody. And
okay, so it's real funny, and I spend far too much time on Twitter for the purposes of this job. So there are some clips and some things that are just used so much it almost becomes cliche. I feel like the Sean Taylor hit, I think that was the 06 Pro Bowl, might be one of like the most used NFL clips we see on a yearly basis, because inevitably when the Pro Bowl weekend rolls around, there's all those people like, I miss when the Pro Bowl was like this, and you see that clip 10,000 times.
Yeah, I can't say how many times that clip pops up. I haven't seen it in a while, but
Oh, you're going to see it soon.
Oh, I know.
Coming back.
I know. It's always around this time of year, whenever something Sean Taylor related happens. I mean, rest his soul, but I mean, the guy was just a huge hit for a game that didn't matter. But that's how it should be played.
That clip and the clip of Ed Hockley saying yes, there are penalties in the Pro Bowl from it was like 2011 or 2012 or something like that. Those are the two that kind of make their rounds about this time of year. So buckle up because you're going to see them soon.
Yes, we will. So we do have a lot to get into, though. So before we get into everything, starting with South Carolina, of course, do you want to hit the Sandstorm pick-me-up?
Sounds like a great idea to me. Let's do it. Would also help if I hit the right button for that.
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. I like the fact that you're now helping us transition into this.
Of course.
I want to see how seamlessly you can do this. So that'll be your challenge tomorrow, is how seamlessly you can transition from whatever we start the show with into the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
That's a challenge I think I'm willing to take.
That's your next step in your radio development process is seamless transitions.
Yes, I'm all my RDP, so I'm all good with that.
So it's been almost a week since the transfer portal closed. In terms of putting your name in, and really since the weekend, we haven't gotten any new names out of it for South Carolina. Still some scholarship spots open that they can fill, but nothing new as far as this week goes. Though last night, we did get a significant event, that being all 25 commitments have officially been announced and signed by South Carolina. Jaden Gibson, who funny enough was the first guy to commit out of the portal, had not signed until yesterday. And that wasn't something to read into, saying, oh, no, maybe he's not coming. These things have different ways of working themselves out. But as of yesterday, we've officially signed all 25 current commitments out of the transfer portal, and they are all officially members of this team now.
Yes, Gibson was the one that took the longest for whatever reason. He had originally committed to South Carolina before anyone on January 3rd. So we're talking about nearly 20 days later, and all is well now. He's been in Columbia. I saw him post on his Instagram story the other day that he was in Columbia when he hadn't signed yet. So no idea what the holdup was there exactly, but it's good to see that everyone signed. And you're right, 25 commitments. I'm thinking back to other years where we've done media day, because eventually we'll do media day with these new guys, and it's going to be real speed dating, Tyler, because it's a lot of guys, way more than I think I've seen South Carolina bring in the past. But that is the nature of not having a good season and needing to replenish with a lot of new talent, especially on the lines of scrimmage.
Well, and you had the expanded scholarships too, so more room to add guys. So I think this is probably going to be the norm going forward, of somewhere between 20, maybe even 30 guys coming in out of the portal. I made the joke yesterday, we always talk about, like, for men's basketball this year at the beginning of the season, you need the press guide because you're not going to know who's who. You're really going to need that for football, especially if there's not a spring game where you can kind of have that, acclamation of like, oh, so-and-so's 74, so-and-so's 19, or whatever it may be. There's a realistic chance we don't see any of these guys with our own eyes playing until September rolls around. And again, it's going to be a lot of a learning process of who's who's wearing what number, and all that kind of stuff in those first couple of games.
Real quick on what you just said there about the spring game. I have seen there have been stories about it, and we haven't really gotten the chance to talk about it too in depth, I don't think. Obviously, it's because of the renovations that are going on at Williams-Brice Stadium that are going to likely cause some sort of change or cancellation. Is there even a alternate idea of how this could be done? You can't necessarily, unless you put something quick together, like putting it in the indoor facility or on one of the practice fields and putting like makeshift stands around. I just don't know how else you could do it. Do you go to a nearby school? But then you're paying costs. I don't know what exactly the plan is. I'm sure they're going to do everything in their power, South Carolina, that is, to not have to cancel this thing. But look, the construction of Williams-Brice Stadium has to come first, and I'd rather see South Carolina not host the spring game and be able to meet their deadline for before the season starts of this first phase, get that done. That way, South Carolina can have a mostly, if not fully packed, Williams-Brice Stadium.
If South Carolina really, really, really wanted the spring game to happen, there are plenty of ways to do it. Like you said, indoor facility, you could go to one of the smaller colleges around and use one of their stadiums, maybe go to a high school. I don't know. There's some big high schools around here. I just don't know how hard they're really going to push for that. And I know Coach Beamer's one of the few coaches in America last year that had a spring game, albeit not on TV, because he does understand the value of it. But they may just say, hey, for this year, let's just take the extra practice. Don't worry about the spring game, and maybe you get back to it in 2027. I do think it's interesting, and I'm going to be intrigued to see how this narrative plays out over the next couple months, because there's no spring portal window. And that was the thing last year that Matt Rhule kind of started the dominoes falling when he put out there, well, I don't want, people to be able to watch our spring game and get tape on guys and then snatch them up in the portal when that reopens after the spring. We don't have that this year. And I'm interested to see how many schools reinstate their spring game after a lot of them just, quite frankly, didn't have them last year. Are they dead? Do they come back? I don't know. Again, Beamer seems to understand the value in it and want to do it, but when you don't have a full stadium to be able to send people into, then maybe you just skip it this year. Maybe it comes back in 27, or maybe it doesn't come back at all. I don't know. You do question the value of it in today's day and age. I enjoy it because it just gives us an opportunity to see these new guys, especially for a year like this where you have a new offense. And, yeah, we'd be watching a very vanilla, basic version of it, but seeing just even a bare-bones version of Kendall Briles' offense is something I'm intrigued about. And I hope I don't have to wait until September to see it, but that seems like it's likely going to be the case.
And it would make it easier for not just the media, but also the fan base to really see what this team is going to look like, because, again, it's 25 new guys in terms of transfers. You have a lot of freshmen joining this team that are very intriguing to watch, and we'll get our chance to at practices and whatnot, but the fans can't see that. And so I hope South Carolina does find a solution to this, whether it is – because, again, it's not like they use the entire stadium anyway. Last year they had one side of the field completely unavailable to use. I mean, I think they had to open up the other end zone across from the student section to let people put more people in the seats,
right,
rather than just filling up. So I don't know. I would hope they can figure it out. Will he be? Worst case, maybe they can square off something with like a Benedict or something that's right down the block. That's about a 12,000 seat stadium, if I'm not mistaken. And South Carolina's had big crowds for the spring game before, but it's not like they need necessarily those big numbers, because it's not like it matters really at all. So I don't know. I hope they do find a solution, though, and just don't outright cancel it.
Yeah, again, it'd be an opportunity to see a lot of these new names, coming in here from the transfer portal. But regardless, excited to see what these guys do, whether it be in the spring game or when the season does roll around. We do know how many guys we've officially lost because the portal closed last week. 18 official departures. Interesting here, and there's still 3 guys that haven't committed anywhere yet. That's R.J. Newsome, Miles Norwood, and Tayshawn Alston. All these other guys, with the exception of Air Nolan, all went to Power 4 programs. Now, yeah, there's a varying degree. You got a Des U that's going to Alabama compared to a Boaz Stanley and Jatavius Shivers going to Purdue. Those are two opposite ends of the spectrum when you talk about, Power 4. But I really thought, especially the offensive linemen, a lot of these guys might take a step down and go play at a G5, maybe an FCS level, but give them credit. Pretty much all of them to this point are going to play at other Power 4 schools.
I think it makes sense that they're going to smaller Power 4 schools. Let's say, like, Purdue is not the same as South Carolina. These guys are big enough to play at the Power 4 level. It's just, are they good enough to play at South Carolina and the SEC? Clearly not, since they're going down a little bit. But I mean, it makes sense. I'm not surprised that none of them. I'm honestly surprised more so that a lot of them got signed. That's the big thing here after such a down year, that most of these guys got picked up and are going to be playing college football at the Power 4 level in 2026.
Yeah, best of luck to them. I think we'll all maybe keep one eye out, see what these guys do, especially ones that weren't able to produce here at South Carolina as they continue on their college careers. We're 219 days away from the 26 college football season starting, but that doesn't mean there aren't a plethora of early top 25s out there. Where South Carolina sit on the latest ones, and how much does it matter, and what criteria should you use if you're crafting one? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Thursday here on The Game. Oh, bear with me for a moment here. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you here on your Thursday on the game. Again, we are a long way from the 2026 college football season into starting, but that's not stopping many outlets from putting out their way too early top 25s. We ran through some of these yesterday from places like CBS and Yahoo that did actually feature South Carolina in a couple of them. Sporting News put out theirs yesterday. Didn't actually feature Carolina in the top 25. Again, you're going to kind of get a mixed bag there with these outlets thinking, Carolina is worthy of being in the top 25 and thinking they're not. At the end of the day, as we talked about yesterday, it doesn't matter. But I do think it's intriguing how many of them will view what Carolina has done so far in the offseason as worthy of being a team that, like I said, if you're ranked 25th, it tells me you're about 8-4, that they value what Carolina's done already as being worthy of making that significant of a jump from 25 to 26.
And I think people also realize, like we do, that this is a make-or-break season for the Gamecocks in a lot of ways, and for Shane Beamer and his status as the head coach of this program. If they have a bad season, wouldn't be surprising at all if a move is made. But obviously, South Carolina's had this little trend here, Tyler, that you mentioned yesterday, of even years just being really good here with the Gamecocks. 2022, they won 8 games, made it to the Gator Bowl. 24, won 9 games, made it to the Citrus Bowl. You would imagine 26 follows this little trend of, okay, good year, bad year, good year, bad year. Hopefully, this is a positive year for South Carolina in a lot of ways, where don't necessarily need to make the playoff, but you kind of hope they're right in the thick of things with 8-9 wins. I mean, you don't want to barely make a bowl game. And I think if you get to that 8-9 win mark, you're likely going to be ranked at some point this season.
Yeah, hopefully so. And again, we got an entire offseason to break down the changes and where the hope is for next year and, and all that kind of stuff. The reason I bring up this Sporting News top 25s because they've done something that a lot of the other ones that I've seen so far haven't done, and they actually put Indiana at number 1. Like, I've seen Indiana at like 7, 8, around there, taking a step back, basically considering the talent that they're losing, namely Fernando Mendoza at quarterback. It's so funny to me, though, like, should we automatically give a defending champion days after winning the title? Should they just automatically be number 1 in your way too early top 25? Like, that almost feels like a decent rule of thumb, but that typically doesn't happen.
I think they should be number 1. I think we have seen, though, before in years past where the defending champ has been, it's not like the defending champ is just not ranked, right? The defending champ typically is still ranked somewhere within the top 10, probably closer to the top 5, but maybe not always number 1. I think, if I'm thinking back correctly, I think this happened a few times with Alabama, Clemson, when they were winning national championships. So it wouldn't be surprising, but I think you got to leave a team like Indiana at the number 1 slot for the most part. I'll be interested to see what the AP poll does here whenever they release their preseason top 25 and where how Indiana is viewed heading into this next season, because they'll have to make some big changes on the roster with Fernando Mendoza out of eligibility and Josh Hoover taking over, who's a very good quarterback coming in from TCU. But I think it's fair. I wouldn't blame anyone for putting Indiana at number 1 in their rankings, is what I'm trying to get at.
And again, at the end of the day, these things don't mean anything more than just conversation points. But if you're really trying to craft a way to early top 25, if you only had to focus on one criteria, what are you looking at? Because, and even with like the AP poll in the preseason, it's so hard to guess because so much changes now in off seasons when it comes to roster turnover and all that kind of stuff. Like, do you look at the coach? Do you look at what they've done in the portal so far? Do you look at returners? Like, is there one criteria that should stand above the rest if we're trying to create these way too early top 25s that should matter more than others?
Well, I think you almost need the returning part and the transfer portal to go hand in hand. I don't think you can say one or look at one without the other, because returning players is only one part of your roster. You're experiencing so much change by bringing in different transfer portal guys, and not everyone's going to have a class of 25 to 40 new players, if not more, coming in. Some teams may feel good about what they have, and I'm not sure exactly who has the lowest amount of portal turnover, but I can imagine there's some schools out there that are not going out there and flipping over their entire roster overnight. So I think you just need to have that's what I would look at is, okay, where do these teams sit in like the portal rankings? Who do they bring in? Who do they have coming back? I think that's why we see South Carolina, quite honestly, ranked in some of these way too early top 25s with CBS and Yahoo Sports. I think a lot of it has to do with you bringing back your core of good players that are returners in Lenoris, Nick Harbor, and Dylan Stewart. You're bringing in a very solid transfer portal class with a lot of good talent, and the losses that you have, not too damaging. I would say probably like Dre Jacobs is your biggest loss, but wide receivers, you can replace those players for sure. So I think South Carolina is getting ranked because of those reasons. I do wonder, though, if they would crack the top 25 in the AP poll when the season gets going.
See, for me, I think this is the point in time where I just kind of look at the coaching more than anything else. Because, again, you can bring in 30 or 40 transfer portal players. That doesn't tell me how those guys are going to be. And the correlation of number of portal guys or even number of guys retained, look at, Clemson last year, doesn't always correlate to success on the field. So I think at this point in time, because there is still so many unknowns, I think you really got to look at coaching. And again, going back to Indiana being number one in Sporting News' poll, I'm not ready to proclaim that Curt Cignetti is the best coach in all of college football of this generation, but he sure had one heck of a turnaround in a short period of time. So until proven otherwise, I have a hard time not placing him at the top of the list, right? If I'm looking at this purely from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, I think you have to place him at the top of the list. And when you look at the rest of this top 25 from the Sporting News, anything that stands out in terms of teams that are maybe ranked too high, teams that are surprisingly ranked? Anything here that you're seeing?
I guess nothing surprising. In the end, it's kind of the usual suspects inside the top 10 with the exception of Indiana. Look, Ohio State, always going to be good. Georgia, Notre Dame, again, Texas Tech spending a buttload in the portal. Like, nothing here really surprises me. I guess maybe, and again, we're just looking at this one specific top 25. LSU at 17, because I feel like there's so much hype around Lane and obviously what they're spending in the portal, what he's bringing in, that I figured you may put him higher. But again, I'm not upset or mad about that. A lot of people giving a lot of credit to Matt Campbell here, 18th behind them with Penn State, expecting them to jump right back in the mix of being a playoff contender in year number one over him. Wait and see. I give him credit for what he did at Iowa State. We'll see what he does at Penn State. I'm not ready to put them that high yet, but again, it's conversation points, if nothing else, which, hey, we need plenty of that in the offseason. But it is interesting to see what these different outlets, how they view these different teams.
That's truly what it is. I think I was a little bit surprised with Penn State being 18. I haven't kept up too closely, but I know that Matt Campbell has brought in some of his talent from Iowa State and other places. So we'll see. I hope Penn State is good. Again, it makes the Big Ten all that more interesting. But yeah, I mean, these rankings may not mean much right now, but it does give a little bit of insight into how these people are viewing these teams heading into the year.
Speaking of interesting, the NFL coaching carousel is spinning. We're getting some hires made, coaches being introduced, and some drama happening in one particular place that just hired their head coach. We'll get into all that coming up as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you on your Thursday on the Game.
If you're a small business owner, a church, or other entity in need of a new HVAC system, AAA Heating and Air has exciting news for you. AAA now offers financing to qualified organizations to aid them in installing a new light commercial HVAC system. It's as easy as calling AAA Heating and Air for a quote or finding them online at Call AAA today. Tell them Jack Veltri from 107.5 The Game sent you over. At AAA Heating and Air, they've got your back. They're offering up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check required. That's right. No need to worry about your credit score. As long as you're a homeowner with a valid bank account, you'll be good to go. Take control of your comfort today by giving a call to AAA Heating and Air at 803-677-1500. Again, the number to call AAA Heating and Air is 803-677-1500. Give them a call today and breathe easy again.
We're here with one mission: to earn the right to be called the world champions in New York. And that's what we plan to do.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. Our head and Jack Felcher with you on your Thursday here on the game. That was the voice of John Harbaugh, the new head coach of the New York Giants, getting introduced yesterday up there in East Rutherford as he'll take over for 2026 as he looks to become the first ever coach to win a Super Bowl at a second coaching stop. Of course, one with the Ravens in the 2012 season. Things have kind of fallen apart there the past couple of years. Gets let go after not making the playoffs, losing to the Steelers in the final game of the NFL's regular season, and now up to new horizons with a very young and talented team up there in New York, and we'll see what he's able to do with that. As so a lot of these positions slowly starting to get filled as we move farther away from the end of the regular season.
Yeah, so Harbaugh to the Giants is all done. It's 5-year deal, I believe. So good move for the Giants.
Like $20 million a year.
Yeah, so I think it's something like that. I think the whole contract in total is over $100 million. So the Giants are definitely paying a lot of money to make sure this works. And I've said it before when they hired him, or when it was not official yet, but it was out there. I think this is the best move they could have made. They needed. When you look at the names they've hired in the past, it's just all been duds, dating back to when, after Tom Coughlin, his time with the Giants ended about 10 or so years ago. And now you bring in a guy in Harbaugh that, he hasn't really, his last few years with the Ravens weren't great. But again, this is a guy with a Super Bowl ring. I think you just need a fresh start, right? He was with the Ravens for 18 years. Things ended kind of sour there. Get him on the Giants. Continue to bring that energy that he brings and the messaging and all that. And I think it works with a younger team like the Giants that has an established core. Like this is a great job to get if you're him and you have a lot of talent to work with.
Well, and I think it's one of those situations where, I think this is good for both sides. When it came to the Ravens, they needed a fresh start. And obviously Harbaugh's still a really good coach, but, it had time to just kind of run out there at Baltimore. They weren't trending in the right direction. That doesn't mean you can't go there and be successful, with New York. Just kind of needed a change of scenery. I'm interested to see who the Ravens do end up hiring. Other coaching hirings that have officially been announced: Kevin Stefanski going to be the head coach for the Falcons, coming over after being fired by the Browns. Jeff Hafley going to be the Dolphins head coach after serving as the Packers defensive coordinator for these past couple of years. And then Robert Saleh back into head coaching ranks as well after spending another tenure as the 49ers defensive coordinator, taking over for the Tennessee Titans. I think unequivocally Harbaugh's obviously the best hire out of this group. Who's number two?
Looking at it, I would say the order in which you have it written down here on the on our spreadsheet here is exactly how I would probably put it. I would say the Giants at 1 with Harbaugh. Number 2, I would say the Falcons with Kevin Stefanski. Number 3, Jeff Hafley with the Dolphins. And then number 4, Robert Saleh. I think with Saleh, it speaks for itself. The Titans are poorly ran, I think, and his tenure with the Jets, another franchise that has just been awful. I mean, he had a pair of 7-2 or 7-10 seasons, but underperformed most certainly with rosters that actually on paper were reviewed. I mean, remember when the Jets were being talked about during the first year of Aaron Rodgers as a team that could potentially go to the Super Bowl?
Yep.
I mean, that's the type of talent they had on that roster, especially with some good young draft picks that were coming in and making an impact. So I think that the key for Saleh to make this thing work, because he's a great defensive mind, he's got to hire a good offensive coordinator. My pick for an offensive coordinator for him would have been Mike McDaniel, but it seems like he's going to the Chargers, so that's off the table. Just don't hire Nathaniel Hackett. I think that's the one name that you definitely do not need to hire if you're Robert Saleh.
Yeah, and look, Robert Saleh is a phenomenal defensive coordinator, as he's shown, it is most recently here with the 49ers after they got bounced, from the playoffs, albeit not their best performance against the Seahawks, but still a good season overall for that group. They dealt with injuries and all that kind of stuff too. But I do look at the Titans kind of similarly to the Jets as just an organization that's not the epitome of functional. You know what I mean? Like they don't scream, come in here and have success for a coach that didn't have success in his first coaching stop. They obviously ran Vrabel out, and he's obviously having success in New England now. I just don't know how successful Saleh, can be. So I'd agree putting that at 4th there. The Hafley thing is interesting because I see a lot of people point out, well, he wasn't really that great at Boston College. You can only be so successful at Boston College. You know what I mean? Like Matt Ryan ain't there anymore. This ain't 2007. Like there's a ceiling on Boston College and what they can do in the ACC. Obviously, they don't stack up when it comes to NIL compared to other programs around the ACC. So I don't really hold that against him. I think he's done a good job as the Packers defensive coordinator. Again, we'll see how good he is as a leader of men right? Because I think that's one thing that was Mike McDaniel's detriment. As you mentioned, he's likely to go become the OC with the Chargers now, which that's going to be an interesting dynamic between him and Jim Harbaugh. But like McDaniel's a great offensive mind, but when it came to like leading a group of men, especially when things got a little tough, McDaniel didn't seem to be good at that. How can Hafley do with that? We'll see.
It's a good point. And for your Falcons, hiring Kevin Stefanski. By the way, the whole Baker Mayfield drama, that was kind of funny. I did not have that on my bingo card when Stefanski got hired. I think it's a good move for the Falcons. Obviously, you could speak a lot more closely to this. I think he's a good coach, but had some bad years with the Browns, and it's the Browns after all. But you hope with Atlanta, who is coming off a pretty disappointing tenure with Raheem Morris, and hasn't made the playoffs since the Super Bowl year. Is that correct?
The year after. So they lost to the Eagles in the divisional round.
That's right.
The year after.
That's right.
Then Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl, obviously. But yeah, it's been almost a decade since they've been back to the Super Bowl. Funny you mentioned that thing about Baker Mayfield. The journalist that he quote tweeted on that, Orlando Ledbetter of the AJC, was my sports journalism professor when I was in college.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he's known to stir the pot a little bit. And to be clear, it wasn't Stefanski calling Baker Mayfield a failure. Orlando Ledbetter was positioning it as, Baker Mayfield failed as the quarterback in Cleveland and all the things that went wrong with Stefanski and all that kind of stuff. Have you been keeping up with the drama of the Sanders family and Stefanski in reference to the Falcons fans? You familiar with this?
Have not.
So, because of course Kevin Stefanski was the coach of the Browns that drafted Shedeur Sanders, and there was, it didn't seem like Stefanski wanted to draft Sanders. They draft Sanders. He ends up starting some games for them down the stretch this year. Season wasn't great. Stefanski gets fired. The perception of the relationship with Stefanski and Shedeur has angered a certain portion of the Atlanta fan base that just loved Deion. And look, Deion, phenomenal player in his NFL tenure. He's not shown a lot of love to the Falcons since he's left. And a lot of them are positioning it as it's disrespectful to the Sanders family that the Falcons hired Stefanski as their head coach. It's ridiculous. For one, Arthur Blank did not own the team when Deion played. He didn't own the team till a decade later. So he has no allegiance or tie to Deion and the Sanders family anyway. But it's such a reach, right? There's a certain portion of the Falcons fan base that always wants to be miserable, and I think that's this part. It's stupid. It's off-season fodder. And it's not gonna have any bearing on anything, but it is been interesting to see this come up in the last couple of days since he's been hired.
He only played 4 years with the Falcons. Real quick, I will say, as we kind of look towards, because there's still 6 other job openings, what do you think is the next job that will get filled here over the next few days?
The timing of things is kind of hard to predict. Because anybody can be hired at any time, and all these places are obviously interviewing coaches left and right. Maybe the Steelers, just going to throw that out there. I know Mike McCarthy, I believe, interviewed with them yesterday or the day before. I would think that hire is probably coming pretty soon. If you want to ask me what the best job
I was about to say, what is the most desirable job right now?
Obviously the Bills. Now, we'll get to what happened with the Bills yesterday in a moment, but and again, we talked about it going into the playoffs. Not the best roster from top to bottom, but you got 17, and 17 is going to be attractive to everybody in terms of this coaching carousel, no matter what the talent around him looks like. So Bills unequivocally, and I have this article from The Athletic where they were voted by a pretty significant margin as the most desirable job from people within the NFL.
Yeah, pretty desirable, but, also got to listen to what the owner says and all that nonsense. It might be less desirable because of what we'll get into in the next segment.
Yes, Terry Pegula, the owner of the Bills, spoke yesterday and created quite a lot of controversy with people still within his own locker room. We'll get to that coming up next. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Ed and Jack Feltry on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Thursday. Wrapping up hour number one, talking about the NFL coaching carousel, and the latest team to add their name to the list of needing a head coach was the Buffalo Bills after firing Sean McDermott following their playoff loss this past weekend to the Denver Broncos in overtime. And again, this job extremely desirable, but sometimes when the owner starts to speak, that can make things a little more difficult. And yesterday, Terry Pegula in the press conference announcing or giving more explanation to the firing of Sean McDermott had some interesting comments around Keon Coleman. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff, who felt strongly about the player. And, he's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it, but I'm here to tell you the true story.
Of course, Keon Coleman, their second-round draft pick back in 2024, and in his 2 years in the league, like he's done okay, but he hasn't set the world on fire quite in the way that I think a lot of people would expect. He actually did have a touchdown catch over the weekend, but it seems internally they're not pleased with that draft pick, according to, again, the owner of the Bills.
Yeah, there's a few ways to look at this. So number one, he has underperformed. That's clear as day for being the 33rd overall pick. A guy that you really thought could be. He played basketball at Michigan State. Like, the guy could jump out the gym. So you kind of hoped that would translate over to the NFL. Of course, I think a little bit of a work in progress, but he's only 22 years old. The problem is he kind of had a rough year in 25, not even based on his stats, just in general, kind of off the field too. He was healthy scratched a few times throughout the season for missing team meetings, being late. He was benched for the first offensive series against the Patriots in one of the games earlier this year as a disciplinary action. I mean, and you've had guys like older guys on the team. Like, I remember Deion Dawkins, offensive lineman for the Bills, kind of calling out Keon like he needs to grow up. Like, that's the fact of the matter. So I understand that standpoint of it. What I don't agree with is the way Terry Pegula handled the whole situation yesterday. I've never really seen anything like that, honestly, Tyler, of a team just outwardly throwing a player under the bus by name and basically saying, yeah, he was a bad draft pick, which is crazy to think about. You could say that years down the line, maybe after his career is over, but that maybe it didn't work out. But the guy's in his second year. He's only 22 years old, and imagine that's damaging for the kid's confidence. First off, if I'm Keon Coleman, I'm asking for a trade, and I know that the tenure with the Bills has not gone well. I saw Ocho Cinco put out a tweet yesterday that he'll train with Keon and get him right and all that sort of stuff. I hope so. I hope Keon Coleman does figure it out. He needs to be better. But the way the Bills handled that and a lot of other things during that press conference yesterday, it's no wonder Terry Pegula hasn't spoken to the media in years. He hardly ever does, right, even as the owner of the Sabres as well. It's just not a good look. That whole press conference yesterday with him and Brandon Beane was just not good.
And that was the first time I'd ever, to my knowledge, remember hearing Terry Pegula speak. And it's really funny because all these owners, they're obviously billionaires and very successful in their respective businesses. But sometimes when these guys get behind a microphone, it's like they're babbling idiots, right? Like, why would you say something like that? And especially if you were going to try to trade for Keon Coleman, you've diminished his value by saying publicly how bad he is, right? So you can't ask for anything that high because people know that you don't view him that highly anyway. Like, it's just a weird situation. And again, now you got the video that's come out of Brandon Beane when they draft him, talking about how excited he was to draft him. You know what I mean? Like, there's contradictions all over the place. And look, again, Josh Allen being there is going to make this job attractive. But if I'm a coach that's taking this job, I got kind of one eye open of like, what's this leadership and ownership actually going to be like if they do hire me?
Exactly. And it feels like this whole move with McDermott was made out of just pure emotion, because you hear Pegula cut off Brandon Beane again later in the press conference saying why the Bills lost was because of a bad call, which is definitely not the only reason why the Bills lost this game. They turned the ball over 5 times if Terry forgot. So it's that. It's not including Josh Allen in any discussions, not notifying the team at all of the decision to fire McDermott. Like, that's something they found out via social media, which is a big no-no,
right,
in my opinion. So this press conference really couldn't have been worse for the Bills, and I think it could potentially deter away a few potential candidates. I don't know. You hope it doesn't. You hope the Bills are able to get the best guy that they want, but this did not help yesterday at all.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine, but again, they didn't do themselves any favor yesterday by any means. Hour number 2 on the way. Steve Spurrier getting inducted into the South Carolina Athletics Hall of Fame. What does that mean for the program of South Carolina? What has he done for them? We'll discuss that coming up next. It is the Extra Point here in the game. Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head, Jack Veltri, Wes Mitchell jumping in here with us now. We'll talk to Will Helms a little bit later on in the hour. Go over some analytics of what's been going on with the transfer portal and taking a look at South Carolina's newest adds for the 2026 season. They'll be coming up at 10:30. Jack's got to bounce a little bit early today. Baseball stuff, is that what it was?
Baseball,
Jack?
softball, media day.
Okay, cool.
Is over at Founders, so that's where I'll be most of the day.
We 3 weeks from tomorrow.
Yeah.
3 weeks from tomorrow is opening day of baseball.
Yeah. By the way, how was Monty Lee yesterday?
He was good. Yeah, we had him on at the beginning of the halftime show. We didn't get a chance to dive like super deep into specific roster stuff. Just kind of more of a general overview. We did talk a little bit about the battle for leadoff hitter, which obviously going to be vitally important, replacing a guy like Nathan Hall. But yeah, interested to see what this team finally looks like. 27 new faces coming in, 10 returners. So we joke about the media guide on day number one. You're really going to need it if you're going out to Founders Park for the opening series against Northern Kentucky.
Yeah, you definitely are. This is a definite overhaul of a roster, but that's what you do after a season like the one you had last year.
Well, can you rebuild an entire team for the most part in the transfer portal? I think is the question we're going to see answered. I mean, it was a top 10 portal class by most standards, and you did keep a few guys, but for the most part, complete overhaul. Kind of similar to the South Carolina offensive line. Like, it was just a few guys stayed, but for the most part, completely new look. Gamecock baseball. Obviously, there is some pressure to win this year, I think, and fan base obviously not happy with what happened last year, and so I'll be very curious. Like, can you build just about an entire roster through the portal and have success? Obviously, they put a lot of resources behind building that portal class, and Jack, you'll be out there covering pretty much every moment of it, right?
I will be. I will be there from start to finish, thick and thin, however good or bad it gets.
For your sake, I really hope it's a better season than last year. I felt bad for you on some of those trips late in the season.
Yeah.
Now you get to go to cool places and eat good food and all that kind of stuff, but watching bad baseball is not fun.
No, that's what the job. It's what you're there for, is to see baseball, and hopefully it'll be better this year.
Again, 3 weeks from tomorrow, things will get started over at Founders Park, and we'll continue to talk about that team. We'll see what's said at Media Days today, maybe dive into some of that coming up tomorrow. Real cool thing announced a little bit earlier on this week. The South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame going to be inducting its class of 2026 coming up in May. And I don't know if there's a specific headliner, but the most notable name of this class is Steve Spurrier, of course, for what he did at South Carolina for his decade here. Again, really got this program to another level. And unfortunately, the program hasn't quite been back to that same level since then. It begged the question in my mind in reading this the other day about his induction coming off the heels of Monday's national championship. Is Spurrier this program's Signetti? Now, again, he didn't win the national championship, but he got them right there on the cusp of being in that position to be playing for, at the time, BCS titles into the, college football playoff era. And unfortunately, again, the success since then has not been on quite the same level. But you look at the history of Indiana football before Signetti got there. You look at the history of Carolina football before Spurrier got here, very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, certainly similar. I wouldn't say he's a one-to-one Signetti because, like you said, Tyler did not win a national championship at all during his tenure, but did not have the immediate success right away. He got South Carolina to a pair of bowl games in his first 2 years, but it was, his first 5 years were 7-5, 8-5, 6-6, 7-6, 7-6 before reaching the SEC championship and having a 9-win season in 2010 and losing in what is now the Peach Bowl, but it was the Chick-fil-A Bowl at the time. So it was a bit more of a slow burn for him to get to the point where 2011 through 13, you're having 3 straight 11-2 seasons and finishing as high as ranked as number 4 in the country. And it makes you wonder if the college football playoff were 12 teams or just if the BCS were eliminated by that point, it was the college football playoff. Would South Carolina have made it? We'll never know, really. But South Carolina, it was in a better place because of Spurrier during those years. And I think you can compare it to Cignetti in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't say it's exactly like that situation. No one really has had a situation like the one Indiana's had.
Yeah, I mean, he's the bar. And again, Spurrier didn't win the national championship, but in terms of where both programs were prior to being taken over from head coaches, I do think there's a lot of comparisons there.
First of all, have y'all noticed a beef between Cignetti and Saban? I saw people talking about this online, like that. Like so Cignetti was at Bama for 1 year, right? So
right.
It's not like he's been there for 10 years, but a lot of Saban's other assistants, like Saban doesn't like to pick against them. Like he flipped a coin, I think, one day when it was Kirby and who would that have been?
Maybe Lane?
Sark?
Kirby and Sark.
Yeah.
He flipped a coin because he didn't want to pick between his two children, basically.
Right.
And I get it. Cignetti was not there for a super long time. But people have started to point out that Saban is a little bit more reserved in his praise of Cignetti compared to, everybody else in college sports right now is like,
sure,
this is one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen. Keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
I do think it's hard for me to compare Spurrier to Cignetti too because it's just such a different era. Like we just saw the absolute perfect storm with Indiana. Now, some of that is, he's just a great coach, attention to detail. It's kind of Saban's approach of, hey, job's not finished. Like we're not celebrating until until literally the confetti is falling. And so, but you take in the fact that you have as much parity in college football as ever. You have now a greater access to the playoff because there's more teams. You have NIL and the transfer portal combined, which is spreading out the talent more than ever. Is Cignetti in any other era? Throw in the fact that I guess technically this year you were pretty much all the COVID guys. Not all the COVID guys this year. You did still have some lingering guys in college football that had extra eligibility. And I don't know how many of those older guys for Indiana were leaning into the COVID years, but they are just an older team, And so I think what Spurrier did was very, very special at South Carolina for its own reasons, and I think what Cignetti has done in Indiana, and it doesn't appear like they're going away by any means the way they're recruiting right now, but they're not going to go undefeated next year. Like this was a. You think they are, Jack?
Clip that.
I'm writing down the hot take.
Yeah.
No undefeated Hoosiers in 2026.
That's not a hot take at all.
I don't think they're going undefeated necessarily.
That's all it says. They're not going undefeated.
Yeah, but Kurt Cignetti's going to find this clip. He's going to use it for fuel to the fire.
Is Hoover winning the Heisman?
He's a good quarterback. I think he certainly could. He could.
Possible.
I mean, he could. He could.
Shoot, you could win the Heisman.
I couldn't. That's where the line is drawn.
Hey,
I couldn't.
You don't have any eligibility left?
No.
No, you don't want to go back to grad school and get some extra.
I'm done with schooling. But sorry, Tyler. We're just
no, it's all right.
We're just
riffing here.
Hammering away at your comparison.
To get it back on track a little bit, because it's been talked about ad nauseum, Indiana was losing its program in college football before Cignetti got there, which is what made this turnaround so remarkable. And South Carolina was not that low, and you can speak to this better than Jack and I can in terms of the conversations around this program right before Spurrier took over. But I imagine there are similarities of this was looked at as a place where success was on the ceiling of success was only so high. And I get it. Holtz had finally gotten them to some bowl games and won some games there. So it was trending better than it had for the better part of the many decades before that. But still, nobody looked at this as a place where you could come and suddenly win 11 games a season, which Spurrier did. It took a few years, but he did.
Yeah, and I think the other difference to me, though, is just the fan support at South Carolina. Like, literally 21 straight losses at one point, and you were still packing Williams-Brice Stadium. Like, the funny thing about South Carolina is that while the outside world may view them the way you just described, I don't think the fan base itself would describe itself that way as a program. Like, South Carolina fans have always had hope that there is a way out of this. Like, there is a path to ultimately winning. I mean, I remember, see, I was in school when Spurrier was hired. I literally remember the day he was hired. I mean, there are people celebrating like this guy is going to lead South Carolina to a national championship. You also got to remember at the time, there probably was not a bigger name coach in college ball than Steve Spurrier. Like, you were hiring Steve freaking Spurrier. Like, this would have been like, let's say Saban had left Bama and did his NFL stint after Bama, and then was there for a couple of years and just said, I'm getting back in college ball, and goes to South Carolina. Like this, I mean, he was the name in college football at the time. So I mean, I think that's the other difference. Cignetti, I mean, everybody, I feel like, I get, if you even cared about the hire, you were going, that's pretty good hire for Indiana. Nobody was going, yeah, they're going to make the college football playoff. Even they made the college football playoff last year. How long did it take us this year to be like, this Indiana team is different than the one last year? I mean,
the Oregon game was the one that sold it for me because they actually beat a quality opponent.
Some people, it took them beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I mean, even then, you're like, okay, they beat Oregon. Well,
on the road too.
What do we even know about this Oregon team? You know what I'm saying? You're like, we think they're good, but it's like, I mean, it took a long time. Like nobody. I mean, by the end, everybody was comparing them to what 2019 LSU.
Yes.
But that was by the very, leading up to the national title game was when you really started to hear that. But are we ever, I mean, at some point we will, but are we going to see anything like this happen again in anytime soon, man? Like, just for Indiana. I mean, even when there's been quote-unquote parity in the past, the Blue Bloods find their way to the top.
Sure.
They just do. For Indiana to not just be the Cinderella story. Like, you've had Cinderella stories. Oh, Boise State won a big bowl game and made this iconic hook and ladder moment. But you know what I'm saying? Like, but to go win the national title, like, I don't even know if there is a comparison to this.
And the significance for Indiana is they're the first to do it this way, right? Like, and we'll stick in the Big Ten, stay in the state of Indiana. Like, if Purdue suddenly had this amazing turnaround and they won the national championship in 2028, we'd just say, oh, well, they just kind of followed the Indiana model. Like, you're now the standard of what these other programs are shooting for, saying, hey, if they can do it, we can do it too. Again, obviously easier said than done, but I don't think we'll ever be able to see anything like this because what Indiana has done is so improbable. Anybody else is just going to say, oh, well, they just did it like Indiana did.
How many people did Cignetti just inadvertently, indirectly get fired? In the sense of...
Well, turn the heat up on a lot of people.
That's what I'm saying, though. In the sense of, well, Indiana did it. What excuse do I have for so many programs, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it maybe changed the dial just a little bit for multiple coaches, I think.
I want to get into that a little bit more on the other side. I also have another question to ask about Steve Spurrier as well. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head, Jack Feltree, Wes Mitchell along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Again, Wilhelm's going to join us coming up at 10:30. Go over some transfer portal analytics as we figure out what these new faces South Carolina can do coming up this fall. We're talking about coaches here, and I'll get back to the question that Wes asked about Cignetti and the effect it's going to have on these other coaches in a moment. But I want to get to this because this conversation started with, again, Steve Spurrier being a part of the class of 2026 for the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame introduction coming up in the month of May. Do you, I guess wish is maybe not the right word, would you have liked to see Steve Spurrier embrace his South Carolina ties a little bit more? Right, and I get it. He won the national championship at Florida, played at Florida. That's, home number one for him and still does a lot of things associated with that program. But there's this kind of large disconnect, and I get it. His exit was not the best back in 2015, but it's almost like outside of this bubble, people kind of forget that he coached here, right, until people bring it up randomly. Like, there's not this line of connection, it seems like, between Spurrier and South Carolina since he left here, right? And that just for the success that he had, you would think there'd be something a little more close-knit to a degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we have to remember is the exit that he had. And I mean, I wrote a story the other day about the Hall of Fame thing for GC, and some of the comments on on different social media, people are still clearly not over the fact that he quote-unquote quit on South Carolina. You interpret that however he left, however you want, whether you thought it was right, wrong, whatever, doesn't matter to me. But I think the whole way he left rubbed people the wrong way. And look, he's been back here a few times now from my memory over the last few years since I've been on the beat. Obviously, a few years ago, with I think it was the Jacksonville State game they had.
It was.
Yep. Yeah. What was it? What was that, 23? So that would have been the anniversary of
the 2013.
Yeah. So
team.
they honored the 2011 through 13 teams, if I'm remembering correctly. I know he was at Dawn Staley's statue ceremony. So it's not like he hasn't been back here. It's been a long time since he had been here before that, if I'm remembering correctly. But
he popped in at a men's basketball game randomly at some point. Do you remember that? There was
do.
Some buzz
it
about.
Was pretty recently too, right? It was last year, maybe.
Yeah, it was last year before, and it was like.
It was pretty random.
But it was like they told the media, but it was like. I felt like it was an hour before or something. Just wait,
it's not as embraced by either side quite as much. And again, the exit was messy. I think
it's the exit, man.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing though. Steve Spurrier played at Florida,
right?
Coached at Florida,
won a Heisman at Florida.
He is. When you think of the Florida Gators in football, a lot of older folks will definitely think of Steve Spurrier and what he did from when he played to his coaching years.
And he's still cashing checks from Florida.
And
he works there.
I'm not saying he would embrace Carolina or vice versa as his main love. It's just the Carolina connection is not anywhere in the stratosphere what the Florida one is. And I feel like there could be more. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but it is just odd to me from my perspective that there isn't as much connection considering what he accomplished here as maybe I think there would be.
And I think even Duke, I would say, he's been back to Duke a few times, and he only coached there for 3 years, and he helped that program get back on track. But I feel like that's even more comparable to South Carolina of maybe he is more tied, not more tied to Duke necessarily, but embraces Duke maybe a little bit more than South Carolina. It definitely does feel that way when you look at it from the Florida lens, but I think it's even crazier when you look at it from the lens of the Duke-South Carolina comparison.
I don't know if he embraces Duke more than South Carolina.
Probably not, but I've just seen him embracing Duke a lot more recently.
Wait, no, here's the thing with Duke. Spurrier has always tried to give Duke their love.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's always made a point. It would be very easy to for people to forget about Duke and to forget he even coached there so long ago. I feel like he has always felt grateful for the opportunity he got at Duke, so he's made a point to not forget about Duke.
Good point.
I think it's the way this thing ended, and you do still. and some people said we were crazy for even talking about this. But when he was coming back for that Jacksonville State game, I was very curious to see how some fans were going to react. And some people say, oh, that's ridiculous. He would never get booed or there would never be a negative reaction. There's still very negative reactions from certain people. I'm not saying that's how most of the fan base feels, but it's just I feel like it probably bothers Spurrier after everything he did. That the only lasting memory some people have of it is how he left. Yep. And he has tried multiple times, I feel like, to try and clarify it, and then to clarify it in different words and to kind of give more context. And for a lot of people, though, they just don't want to hear it, and they think that he saw his overall record getting diminished. He saw the win percentage get he saw the future. He knew that was not a good team. He knew that he really wasn't having an effect on them in terms of motivation, and he just exited. And I just it's for some people it's going to be a very long time before they forgive him for that.
Well, and I remember because it was announced, a month or so before that Jacksonville State game about honoring the team, and he was going to be back there. We spent that entire show that day on just people's reactions of. We asked the question, were you going to boo him or cheer him? And that lasted us for hours that day because that was such a polarizing topic for a lot of people. And I remember when the team went out there, it was largely cheers. May have been a few boos here or there specifically for Spurrier, but he seemed to be met overall pretty well. But again, I get it. It's just, and again, this is from my perspective as somebody that was not here when that happened, and there's no doubt that sent shockwaves through all of college football with the way that exit happened. But it is interesting to me just how much the Carolina stuff gets overlooked in the years since, considering the success that he did have here and what he meant for this program to help them be where they hopefully can be in the next handful of years with Beamer at the helm now, because Spurrier did prove that you can come here and win.
Real quick, Wes, you were the one that was here when it all went down. What was the reaction really like what was the reaction initially by everyone from your perspective when it did happen? In a bad way, or
do you have
is it way, was the reaction way worse then obviously people still holding the grudge now?
And is it one of those I remember where I was the moment I found out type of things?
I mean, I know I do, but that was more from a coverage standpoint,
right?
And trying to get it confirmed because it wasn't reported yet when we found out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if people necessarily were ticked off at first. I think at first it was just more wait, what? It was just shock. Because, I mean, guys, think about it. Coaches aren't at places for, a decade plus. You're talking about, if you think of where you are in life when he was hired and then where you were in life then, Steve Spurrier was the coach for a large part of your life, even if you're an older fan at that point. Yeah. So it was just disbelief almost, I think.
Yeah.
Good way to look at it.
Yeah, and again, and anytime we bring them up, and people are waiting on the text line too, it's always a polarizing topic that gets people riled up and stuff like that. But again, going back to the main point, he is going to be inducted into the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame coming up in May. And again, we can talk about that a little bit more as that gets closer. I do want to get back into what Wes asked about Cignetti and what that means for other coaches a little bit later on in the morning. But coming next, do have Will Helms going to join us, talk some analytics when it comes to the transfer portal. Jack's got to bounce out of here. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on your Thursday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Of course, we've talked a lot about the transfer portal over these last couple weeks. Carolina has officially signed all 25 of their commitments. Up to this point, Jaden Gibson being the latest one of those being announced last night. And we'll dive into some specifics on these new faces coming in with our guy Will Helms, who does analytics for Gamecock Central, joining us now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. Will, appreciate the time as always. Haven't heard from you since the end of the season. How we doing, man?
Doing great. How are y'all?
Doing good. Excited to dive into some of these numbers. And Wes sent me your very elaborate analytical breakdowns of a lot of these guys. But I'll start off first, just kind of a 10,000-foot view before you get into the specifics. How do you assess the 25 guys that Carolina has brought in so far?
I think, it's a class that on paper might not be quite as good as what you've seen from some other teams. But I really like this class. I think it's going to be a pretty impactful class, kind of more like the 2024 class heading into 2 seasons ago rather than the 2025 class last year.
Hey, Will, it's Wes. Appreciate you hopping on, man. People always want to know who are the underrated guys in a class, and obviously that can be difficult sometimes to predict. But among the transfers this year, is there maybe a guy or two that stands out to you as maybe being most underrated? And obviously from kind of an analytical standpoint, why do you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think underrated is interesting because you can have a guy like Brandon Cisse last year who was a really highly rated guy, but just didn't seem to get a lot of the off-season talk, whether that's his personality and how he goes about his business or whatever, or even a Kyle Kennard a couple of years ago. I remember, seeing him come in and go, wow, that's a great pickup, and I'm barely hearing anything about it. And so a guy that kind of fits that bill is Quay Scott. Instant impact starter. I think he's immediately one of your, 2 or 3 best players in the secondary at worst. And it's not really a guy, I guess he kind of happened on a day with a flurry of commitments. And so people kind of glossed over like, oh, yeah, they like this guy out of high school. They, got him now. And it's a guy with multiple years of eligibility, a guy who's elite in man coverage, gave up a 72.2 career passer rating when he's targeted. There's a guy who can come in and immediately start the slot, has some positional versatility, a guy that really improves what this defense can do. And yet it's not a guy that I'm really hearing a lot about, whether that's from the recruiting rankings or just from fans or even just some of the experts that are talking about this class as a whole. And then the other guy, I think, a smaller kind of, when you say underrated, you're not expecting him to come in and have 15 sacks. But Drew Collins' underlying numbers are fantastic. He had a 20% pass rush win rate last year, which is substantially better than Dylan Stewart's last year or the year before. And so a guy with lower reps, a little bit of projectable there, but another guy who can come in with multiple years of eligibility and really have an impact on this pass rush.
Again, talking to Will Helms, does analytics for Gamecock Central on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines. We kind of always tend to look at where a guy comes from first when it comes to where they get these guys from in the transfer portal. And Carolina's done a good job of getting a lot of guys from various Power 4 programs around the country, Alabama, Texas, Penn State, just to name a few. And we kind of naturally assume, okay, these guys are going to be the more high-level producers considering the fact that they were deemed valuable enough to be at those kind of places in the first place compared to a Dane Arnett coming from Ferris State, even though that's a very successful D2 program. How much do you put into where a guy comes from with what kind of success they can have coming to a place like Carolina?
Well, I think when you look at a team like Indiana that just won a national championship with most of their transfers coming from lower levels, at some point production is production. And yes, you're going to have to project a little bit. But a lot of these guys coming in having instant success that you maybe wouldn't expect are coming from the lower levels. And I think a lot of times when we look at the transfer portal as a whole, we've got thousands of kids transferring. I would say there's probably, 80 to 100 that are guys who could jump in the transfer portal and start for any team. Beyond that, it's kind of how your coaching staff evaluates them and looks at them. And I think in particular, you look at a guy like Nitro Tuggle, who comes from a Power 5 program, had some issues at Purdue, specifically with catching the ball. Pretty important for a wide receiver. But if you're another Power 4 program and you're looking at it and saying, okay, we've identified this guy as a potential impact player. We have to use him in the right way. And I think that's what makes transfer portal rankings so difficult, is it's really hard to project how is this guy going to move from one team to another and then have the kind of impact that team expects them to. What's the plan for them? How are they going to be used? And I think with some of those lower guys, you don't have to worry about that. If you're bringing in a guy who, has 8 sacks at a lower level, at some level he can rush the passer, even if he's not facing that same level of competition week in and week out.
Will, let's talk about this offensive line, man. Obviously, South Carolina put a ton of resources into trying to build this thing up and just kind of rebuild it from the ground up, except for a couple of key guys that they kept there. And, I've tried to tell people, like, hey, they're trying to build a starting 5. They're also trying to build some depth here. So not everybody is going to make complete sense if you're looking at it in an old school way, which was just stack as much talent as possible. It's a little bit more of kind of an NFL approach. You're kind of slot guys like, hey, this guy for the right amount of money could be your backup right guard, for example. But let's start kind of at the top. What stands out to you about Jacarius Peak? And then, of course, I know you had a post about Kojo Poku on our board, certainly like right after his name popped up. Being, in North Carolina for a while, what can you tell us about that kid?
Yeah, so I think when you start at the top, the nice thing is Jacarius Peak is the gem of the class. You don't have to do a lot of projection. He's been a multi-year Power 4 starter. He's been a really good one, kind of all-conference type of player, and a guy that you just kind of expect to come in, go ahead and put in pin that he's going to start at left tackle and just kind of move on. The South Carolina actually has not had a ton of those kind of transfers in the Shane Beamer era. They've had a lot of underrated guys that have come in, but they haven't really had a lot of those, like, top 2 or 3 at the position. You just know this guy's going to play, and he's going to play well. And so I think that really, really helps. But then, you talk about Emmanuel Poku. He's a guy that, like, I didn't even have ranked when I ranked high school players in North Carolina in his class, because he was like 230, 240 coming out of high school. Walked on at ECU, put on a ton of weight, got really good, and then, kind of has done the, G5 to Power 4 transfer. He's a guy I think you can almost guarantee he's going to start somewhere at probably one of the guard spots next year.
And talking to Will Helms, does analytics for Gamecock Central. We'll hold him on the phone lines through the break, and we'll wrap up the hour with him with a few more questions. It is the Garnet Trust Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on your Thursday here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you here on your Thursday, talking with Will Helms from Gamecock Central, does analytics for them as we dive into these numbers and guys from the transfer portal. And Will, let's talk about this running back room. The other day on the show, myself, Wes, and Chris were talking about transfers that intrigued us the most. And both Wes and I picked guys from the running back room. I went with Jabri Wallace-Coleman from Penn State. He went with Christian Clark from Texas, because it's interesting. You have three guys in very similar situations, both all coming from Power 4 institutions. You add in there as well, obviously, Sam Williams-Dixon from Ohio State. But Williams-Dixon and Jabri Coleman, not a whole lot of production, none for Coleman specifically because he redshirted this past year. Clark got some runs, started the bowl game for Texas, but still don't know everything about him quite yet. But, and again, kind of looking at your notes that you sent to Wes here, you kind of look at it as, okay, you bring in three guys, and if one of those guys really hits, then you consider that overall portal haul as a success. You just don't quite know who that guy could end up being.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really smart play, especially given the transfer portal class at running back this year. It wasn't the deepest, and so you were really going to have to pay up for that proven guy. And most of those proven guys were, rising juniors, rising seniors, very few years of eligibility left. And I brought that up a couple of times. I think you can kind of pair the two things together, that Shane Beamer's probably specialty in the transfer portal is retention. You see that South Carolina kept just about everybody they wanted to. And I think you can project that forward. So if you bring in three guys, let's say one of them hits, one of them ends up being really good, you feel pretty good about your odds of keeping him, and he's got 2, 3, 4 years left on your roster. You've done that for probably substantially more cheaply than you could by going out and trying to spend up really high on a Justice Haynes or something like that. You probably save money, and you can use it elsewhere on your roster. So I think it's a really good strategy.
Well, and I think just you have to go into these portal windows, man, saying where do we have to spend? And I think for South Carolina, it was very clear that was going to be in the trenches, both offensive line in terms of upper end talent and just overall quantity, and then of course adding some guys on the defensive line as well. You're going to have to spend money if you're going to go get that many guys at those two positions. Let's talk a bit just about the scheme itself. How much, Will, have you had time to kind of just dive into Kendall Briles and kind of what you expect the approach to be? I think the interesting thing about his scheme is that there are some things that remain constant, but he also is very willing to adjust the overall approach based on talent, based on skill set of the guys he has. So what's kind of your early thought on what to expect from this approach on offense from Kendall Briles with the talent that South Carolina has?
Well, I think the easiest thing that you look at is where did they spend in the transfer portal? What did they do? And can we draw some conclusions from that? And so I actually kind of went in with an open mind, just kind of seeing, okay, they brought in a lot of offensive linemen. Is there anything that these guys have in, just in common with each other? And what I found is a lot of these guys are absolutely elite in non-true pass set situations. Basically, a true pass set is just you're dropping back, you're throwing the ball. South Carolina was among the highest. I think they were second in the Power 4 in true pass set rate, meaning their tackles are on islands a lot. They're throwing the ball just kind of dropping back, no play action, no screen, throwing the ball kind of in rhythm about 40% of the time, which is about double what TCU did. And so if you look at a lot of these offensive linemen, they thrived when they didn't have to set. Maybe they struggled a little bit in, the case of Jacarius Peak. He didn't struggle ever really. But some of these other guys, maybe the numbers on the surface, they gave up 6 sacks. That was terrible. And then you dive into it, and it's like, well, most of those sacks came when they were left on an island and had to block for 4 seconds, or when they didn't have screen passes. And you start looking, and a lot of these guys, not just good overall, but some of the best in the portal at blocking on screens, on play action, on things like that. You're looking at, you would love to be below 5% on pressure rate allowed during a non-true pass set. South Carolina had, I think, 7 offensive linemen over 6%. They kept 2 of the only 3 that were under 6%. And then every guy they brought in is under 4%. So you're talking about guys that are extremely elite at when we get the ball out quick, they're not going to give up pressure. They're not going to get the quarterback off. And so I think one of the things we should see is a lot more rollouts, a lot more screens. You know, we've talked about that before, that you can kind of see with the guys they're bringing in, that's what they want to be. They don't want to be a drop back, put it all on North Sellers, make him read the field, and try to get the ball out. They want to move the pocket. They want to throw a lot of screen passes. They want to do a lot of play action. And I think that should really improve the offense.
A couple more minutes here with Wilhelm, sticking on the offensive line, and we talked about this on the show the other week with a few of the first guys that got out of the portal, that not a ton of these guys have experience in up-tempo offenses, which is what Kendall Briles is obviously going to be running here. Poku is probably the best example, as he was in the fourth-rated offense and seconds per play the past couple of years out there at ECU. How much value do you put on experience within an up-tempo offense and being able to plug in and be effective in that with Kendall Briles this upcoming season?
Well, honestly, I think we think about it a lot as like, especially with offensive linemen, up-tempo means you've got to have better stamina, all that kind of stuff. They've got an off-season to work on that. I kind of look at it as an up-tempo offense puts your offensive line at an advantage because they're not having to deal with as many stunts. They're not having to deal with as many exotic blitz schemes, things like that. They're getting to line up and block the guy in front of them. And for most offensive linemen, that really helps. So assuming the strength and conditioning is going to be okay over the offseason, I actually kind of see it as a positive for a lot of these guys.
Well, man, good stuff as always. We appreciate it. We'll sure be talking to you as the offseason goes along, and look forward to your weekly articles when the season gets back in here again.
Thanks, guys. Always appreciate it.
Again, Wilhelm's there of Gamecock Central does analytics for them. And Wes, you sent me this rundown of things that he had sent to you, and my eyes are kind of going cross-eyed with all these numbers and statistics and all that kind of stuff. But it's good insight. And again, the old saying of numbers never lie, it really comes to fruition at times. And hopefully a lot of these things that he's saying about these portal ads are true, and that leads to success this upcoming year.
The funny thing about that, Tyler, is that you saw how detailed it was.
Yep.
His text along with that was some generic, unorganized notes I've collected over the last few weeks. So you and I saw calculus or something on there, and for him that was just a few little notes he jotted down.
Well, and specifically for like the offensive line, right? Because we all immediately go to Pro Football Focus. Okay, how many pressures did this guy give up? How many sacks did this guy allow? What's his pass blocking grade? What's his run blocking grade? But I think offensive line, you have to really dive even deeper into some of the specific stuff to really tell a story of what these guys can potentially be coming over from these other schools.
Yeah, and just going, and I do the same thing literally, Tyler. If I hear, hey, this is a guy to watch for South Carolina, what do? I go to PFF, plug him in, see how much he's played, see what his grades are. It's really quite terrible practice, to be honest. Like, we always tell people, hey, this should be a guide and nothing more. But then I am completely guilty of going in there, oh, this guy's a 51, So I do appreciate Will going beneath the surface there.
Good work there from Will Helms. We'll talk more about portal coming up in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game.
All right, folks, Garnet Trust Hour was brought to you by our friends at Krantz Cooling and Heating. That's Krantz with a K, coolingwithak.com, 803-672-3224. Obviously, we've all been tracking this storm that's coming in, so I hope and pray you don't need our friends at Krantz this weekend. If you're having any issues already with your heat, go ahead and call them immediately and try to get them out there. I'm sure they'll do everything they can to try and take great care of you as we head into this very, very cold week. After we get through this, think about some preventative maintenance, going ahead and making sure you don't have any issues before those issues do pop up and before we go into a big winter weekend, which might be ahead for South Carolina. Whether it is your AC or your heating, our friends at Krantz, just like they've done for Chris, just like they've done for me, they're going to take great care of you with any and all issues you may have. 803-672-3224.
11 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Towerhead, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you here. Again, appreciate Will Helms for jumping on with us at the end of that last hour to talk all things transfer portal and dive into some of the specific numbers. And as I mentioned in the last hour, we can now officially say, guys, all 25 of South Carolina's transfer portal commitments have officially signed Jaden Gibson. The last one to be officially announced last night. Funny enough, he was the first one to commit out of the portal. We talked about that the other week of kind of what's going on with that, but no worries there. All 25 have officially committed. It's going to take some time to get used to all the names, the numbers, and all that kind of stuff, but it's not complete because there's still other scholarships that you can spend, and we'll see how Beamer and company choose to allocate those. But for the most part, the heavy lifting in the hall of the transfer portal has been done up to this point.
Yeah, we'll see if South Carolina tacks on, in the portal. I think people got to remember, too, like, with the increased scholarships, you have guys who are already on the roster that still, if they stay and play, they will count against your roster total. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have the ability anymore to carry 117, 120 or whatever it was overall, like, going beyond what was your 80. You could have the 85 scholarships and you could just keep a bunch of walk-ons. You can't do that anymore. So I'll be curious to see how many more scholarships they actually will use. Also, you could see more guys. We just saw someone, I guess that was a week ago maybe, who was a former walk-on, gets put on scholarship. So you always have the opportunity for guys who are doing things the right way to get put on scholarship moving forward. But, I think the way you said it, Tyler, was perfect. The heavy lifting pretty much over. I think there's still a position or two you would have said, man, it would have been nice to add here, would have been nice to add there. There is no spring window. There is no spring cleaning. There is no, hey, I remember, Chris, this time last year, or whenever the portal closed last year, there was still a position or two where, we kind of heard, we'll see how things go in the spring. Maybe you add at this spot. Maybe you added that spot in the spring window. You will not have that opportunity anymore unless there's just a lingering guy or two who entered the portal but did not sign with a new school and is just kind of hanging out. But those just are not going to be, like, impact guys, right? They just aren't. So, for the most part, you're rolling with who you got on this roster.
Yeah, and I am wondering one thing, right? And that is with the rules and how they're, constantly changing, constantly evolving, and constantly, guys, being challenged, right? So the whole notion right now that there's not a spring portal window, you are already, in my opinion, seeing the groundwork laid by some of the, frankly, some of these attorneys we talked about yesterday, Mitt Winter, Darren Heitner, others who are in this space on social media, basically saying, hey, the portal is a tool. It is a mechanism. If guys want to de-enroll and enroll at another school really at any time, there's a legal argument that they can. So what I'm getting at is, do we see, not a large volume. It's not going to be 4,000 kids or however many entered the portal in this single window.
I think we're up to 10,000 now, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw, like you said, Tyler, most of the heavy lifting is done. But are there going to be kids, maybe even some prominent ones, that says, you know what, I signed with this school or I'm at this school. I actually would like to try to leave after spring football sometime in the summer, sometime in the preseason. Let's make a run at it. Will we see any of that? And if we do and it's successful, does that cause, does that happen at some other programs? I also had someone tell me this week to keep an eye on the grad transfer market. Now, it is the case now by rule that grad transfers have to go in the portal when other guys do. But if they graduate, say, this summer, will we see, and I'm talking generally, not just South Carolina, will we see maybe some grad transfers get tacked onto rosters? But generally, we have a pretty good idea on paper of what this South Carolina roster is going to look like. And our handy scholarship chart, which I do think is pretty updated by our guy Brian Shoemaker at Gamecock Central, has Carolina at 94 scholarship guys right now. So, Wes, as you were saying, that would leave 11 spots for quote-unquote walk-ons or extra roster spots. Will South Carolina just say, let's say they get to the season and they're still at 94, which I tend to think, there might be some tack-ons, but let's say they're at 94. You might just say, hey, we'll put those 11 guys on scholarship, roll with it, right? But your rosters are limited now more from the, 117, 118. That causes you some issues. It means, frankly, that you got to make sure that right here, right now, that you, for the most part, have the depth that you want on your roster.
Well, Chris, the roster limit is also 105, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, roster limit's 105, and the SEC has now said, because you remember last year, I think it was the Big Ten said, hey, 105 is the roster limit. You can scally everybody. The SEC stood in lockstep and said, roster limit's 105, but we're going to stay as a conference at 85 scholarships. And since then, they've gone the direction of, hey, you can scally everybody. I don't think, unless you have it, Wes, I don't have a confirmation that USC is going to scholarship every player on the roster, but you are at 105. That is your cap for your roster in the SEC.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say, man. You very well may still have some walk-ons, but they're going to count to that 105, right? Like,
That's right.
There may be some guys, and I'm going to be honest, the rules change so quickly, man. I do not want to say 100% of this is still the case, but there are some very technical reasons why. Because you may say, well, all right, if that guy's already on your roster, if he counts towards the 105 anyway, why not just go ahead and scholarship him? There may be some reasons why you wouldn't. One being when they first implemented this, everybody you went over the 85 with, I believe, actually technically chops off from your rev share. Is that still the case, Chris, that you know?
Yeah, that's another question we got to get an answer to is do extra scholarships, call it 20, from 85 to 105, do those count towards your rev share total?
Yes.
It doesn't seem like that's what's being planned for at South Carolina, but I don't think we have a definite answer to that either.
There's all these just kind of what would seem like tiny details, but are really big when you kind of add them all up. So we'll see what that looks like. Point being, I do not expect South Carolina to sit here. Traditionally, you would say, how much are you below the 85? And you would say, you're going to fill all those scholarships. Don't look at it like, hey, you're 11 under right now. You're going to fill it with 11 new players, right? Like, it's not going to play out that way. I'm sure there will be some guys that are already on the team that aren't on scholarship, that are either A, put on scholarship, or B, kept on the team, not on scholarship, but still count towards that 105. So the more we carry on, obviously things continue to change in terms of how your roster is actually put together. Chris, I will be fascinated as well to see what happens after the spring, because here's the thing. I think there's only a handful, maybe handful is not the word. There are only certain players that can get away with saying, I'm not going to enter the portal. I'm going to unenroll. I'm going to enroll somewhere else. I'm going to go through all the technicalities of making that happen. For one, you've got to be a good enough player to make that happen to where people are going to even go through all that trouble, essentially. For two, if you're that good of a player, most schools have buttoned up that contract as well as they possibly can in terms of there being a buyout, to where at least the thought process is, and we'll see how much any of this stuff gets challenged. We'll see what happens with Mensah. I think that's a big factor in all this. What happens with Darian Mensah in terms of possibly leaving Duke, possibly going to Miami, and what is the effect of that on other players? Because, we've seen South Carolina enforce a buyout with Des Uve going to Alabama. So some of these guys, I don't have the contracts, but some of these guys around the country are going to have big enough buyouts that it becomes a huge deterrent in them going to another school, because the buyout, if you pay a buyout, that does come out of your rev share. Yep. So that's dead money, essentially, is how you have to look at it. If you pay a $500,000 buyout, that's before you're even paying the player. That $500,000, not only does it go from one school to the other, it gets chopped off your rev share, cannot be recouped, cannot be spent. It's completely dead money. So I think that's something that will certainly be a deterrent in transferring once guys have signed deals to play for that particular team for this upcoming season.
Yeah, and you've also got, moving parts with all these contracts, right? Late in the game in this portal cycle, you see Prince Umanmielen leave Ole Miss, shocker, for LSU, and it's reported, okay, he's getting a $1 million NIL deal. LSU's going to have to pay a $500K buyout. That's going to come off their cap. Haven't they already spent all their cap money? So then you've got moving around, okay, restructuring some current contracts to take those from, if somebody's getting 50% of their contract's rev share, you're going to try to renegotiate, make half of that now third-party money. It's just absolutely wild, a lot of things that are happening. You saw, Ole Miss, they've been in the mix in so many different things. Stealing Luke Farrelly, who was already at classes and at workouts, reportedly, at Clemson, making him a huge NIL offer. I think reportedly multi-million-dollar per year offer for a linebacker, which may be unprecedented, right? That's the first one I've heard at that position that was that big of a deal, a seven-figure plus deal for 1 year for one player at a linebacker position, not a quarterback, not a defensive end, not an offensive tackle, for a linebacker.
It's got better be Urlacher for that.
I think he's good, but it's like wow.
What?
Yeah, and a multi-year deal supposedly as well. So just so many moving parts. And I think, again, because there's no structure, we're sitting here wondering, all right, allegedly no spring portal window, but will we see some guys after the spring leave? What do their contracts say? Can they get out of their contracts? So many moving parts, and it's going to continue to be fascinating to watch all this happen as we continue rolling along here.
We'll talk more about this, also getting some position breakdowns, not only today, but as the days go by, as we get an idea of what this team's going to look like in 2026. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. All right, guys, you know it. Our friends at Integrated Media, they're going to take that home that you have and make it a smart home for you. They're going to hang your TV. They're going to hide the wires. They're going to make it look professional. And they're going to help you take that extra room in the house that's not really being used for anything but storage and turn it into a man cave or a home theater system. If any of that sounds intriguing to you, call them today, 803-948-8327, or head on over to integratedmediainc.com for more information about everything they got going on. Of course, if all that just sounds like overkill for you, but you want to just kind of take care of your peace of mind, talk to them about upgrading your security and camera system as well. Get that peace of mind so that you know that your home, your valuables, those people, your family are protected as well. Again, call them today, 803-948-8327, or head on over to integratedmediainc.com. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you here on your Thursday on the game, talking transfer portal and roster construction. And, of course, we're still all learning through this process of how things have changed, specifically in this offseason alone. And we head out to the AAA Heating and Air phone lines because Brian has a question about all this. Brian, appreciate your call. What's on your mind today, man?
Hey, guys. Hey, I've been listening, and, you know, okay, the players, yes, we all know that it's just really messed up the way it's set up right now. They have too much control. You know, they're not considered employees, so they have all these freedoms that just really it isn't good for the game. It's not good for the university. But I want to kind of switch a gear here, and, you know, what we just witnessed over the last 2 years with Indiana, $60 million over 2 years of NIL money. I looked it up. $60 million, $40 million this past year to put this team together. So they bought a national championship for $60 million.
Where's that info coming from, Brian? Where'd you look it up?
I just looked up how much money did each individual team. I did Alabama. I just asked Google. I said, how much money did Indiana football spend on NIL? That's all I put in. And I asked it about Alabama. I asked it about Oregon. Everybody else was around. Ohio State was around $30 million, and then we're at $20 million, is what it said. But my question was going to be, and if some of that's wrong, okay. But my question was going to be, over the years, you know, football has developed over time, and programs have developed and become the top dogs, and, you know, the schools that everybody wants to go to because they want to win, and Alabama's and, you know, all that. But now it looks like we're going to have a switch. It's going to be the booster club that can raise the most money that's going to be the top dogs. Or are they going to? Has there been any talk about capping how much a school can bring in? I mean, it just doesn't seem fair. I mean, South Carolina's got plenty of millionaires out of this state, and a lot of them went to the university. So are they talking along those lines? Because all we're going to do is go from one method of top teams to another. And I'll hang up and listen, guys.
Yeah, appreciate the call there, Brian. Again, 803-404-6100. I will say, always be careful when you're out there trying to find NIL spending and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, because of the nature of not having a CBA and stuff like that, numbers that you find aren't always the most truthful because they don't have to be above board with exactly what they're spending compared to, you know, the NFL and other professional leagues that tell you exactly what contracts are and stuff like that. I haven't seen that $60 million number out there that he's talking about with Indiana. I will say, from what I have read, Indiana did not spend the most in the transfer portal, according to people that do have the inside. Now, they did spend a lot, and I'm not saying that they didn't, have a roster that garnered money. When you bring in a guy like Fernando Mendoza, that's certainly going to cost you some money there. But from what I understand, they didn't have the highest NIL budget compared to maybe the Ohio States or Texas and stuff like that. But they made work what they had, and obviously went on to win the national championship. But getting to his further question there's really no way to cap this right now. Again, going back to having to get a CBA and all that kind of stuff where everybody can ultimately agree that, hey, we're not going to spend more than this and we're all going to be on a level playing field. Until we get there, which I don't know if we ever will, this is going to continue to be the Wild West, right? We have rev share, which does have a cap on it, but you can go past that as far as you're possibly capable of when it comes to NIL and all that, as it had kind of been before, you know, rev share came around. So, yeah, it is going to continue to be a lot of the same programs at the top because they can spend a lot of money. But as Indiana did prove, that's not the end-all be-all, because you can spend a lesser amount but supplement that with experience and obviously good coaching, and you can still be successful. So the championship's not going to go to the highest bidder every single year necessarily.
Yeah, well, this might be the first year since we've gone to this model that it hasn't. I mean, I think Ohio State kind of was one of the top one or two spenders, and then they won it last year. Indiana just did it differently, and I think for anybody listening, and not just for football, the Google AI overview is going to be the end of us all, because it will literally make stuff up at times.
Got to be careful.
I just did the exact same search, and it told me for Indiana this year, estimated $21.1 to $25 million, which Chris, if we're guessing that that probably sounds accurate. Yeah. Like a lot of schools, frankly, were spending around that number. And to Brian's question about can this thing be capped? If there's collective bargaining, ultimately there may be one. The players have so much power right now. I don't know why necessarily they would even agree to that. Like, there's going to have to be some give and take there. But there is technically a cap in place right now that says, hey, you have this amount of rev share that can be directly paid from the school, distributed among your various athletic programs, and then you have what is called true NIL, which in theory, every dollar of that true NIL has to be accounted for and approved by their system. Now, everybody that's remotely in major college football right now is doing everything they can to maximize that above the cap number. So there's kind of a cap, but there's not really. And then really the question is, how much can you squeeze in above that cap right now? And the cap is going to continue to rise. It just is. So, Chris, I get. I think a lot of people probably feel the same way Brian does, just about this in general and how big some of the numbers have gotten. But I don't think Indiana didn't spend $40 million on their roster this year. I can pretty confidently say that.
Yeah. I don't know that anybody did this past year. Now, are we on the cusp?
They might this year.
Yeah, will we get there soon? Probably, because there's going to be – it is an absolute fact that a bunch of teams, not one or two, a bunch of teams are going to be over $30 million this year, right? So for the 2026 season and beyond. And the numbers are just going to continue to rise. College football tried to put in, hey, we're going to put in this rev share cap. A lot of the NCAA, a lot of administrators, they kind of wish casted like, hey, all these schools are saying they want rules, so we're going to try to put in some rules, and then hopefully they'll abide by them, right? We think they'll abide by them. They're telling us they're going to abide by them. Well, what happened? All the schools, their coaches, the administrators that are very competitive said, all right, you've got that rule. We're actually going to go around that, which is what everybody has done in the history of college athletics to try to get ahead. So the rev share quote unquote cap is just a floor. If you're not spending, what was it this year? $20.5 million across all sports. Most of that, like you said, Wes, is going to football. So if you want to call it $17, $18 million, that's what you have to spend to field a team that has a chance to compete. The question is, how far above that figure can you go? So, be careful with all. Now, sometimes there are numbers that are reported, and depending on where it comes from, the source, they can be accurate, right? There's reporting of, hey, this school spent X amount of money. The Ohio State one last year. That stuff was pretty well sourced, but do be careful when you're just searching Google, or finding a spreadsheet of here's what every team in the Power Four spent on their NIL budget. That stuff isn't publicly available. Even people who are experts in this space are constantly trying to figure out, hey, what is team X going to spend this year? What did team Y spend last year? It's really hard. And look, the idea about capping compensation overall in college football is not a bad idea. There's a lot of really good ideas out there. The problem is every time you hear, well, they need to cap it, or they need to make sure that athletes can't leave after they sign a contract, right? Very perfectly fine ideas, probably ideas that would help the sport and minimize the chaos. But the problem, as you said, Wes, we don't have a mechanism or a structure to do it like pro sports leagues. Then you add in the academics, enrolling at schools. That just adds another layer that complicates all this. So, as frustrating as it is to people, this is the norm until there's some type of structure put in college football. And what they've tried to do so far is absolutely not working.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate again, the Google AI machine it's actually pretty good, but it's pretty good 90% of the time, and you don't know when it's giving you the other 10%. Like, it will hallucinate.
Well,
And so
it's pulling from all reaches of the internet. So if you write a blog post that Indiana spent $100 million, then it's going to find that somewhere and calculate that into the answer that it gives you.
yeah, but and also these AIs will literally just make things up. Like they're pulling from all these resources, but anybody that's used ChatGPT or Gemini or all these different things, sometime for whatever reason, it will just literally make things up. So you do have to be careful with it, and it'll give it'll give different people different answers for no known reason whatsoever.
Yeah, no, a good question to ask, though, because, again, we're still all trying to understand this to a degree
good call, Brian.
in this new era of college sports. Since he did bring up Curt Cignetti, I want to get back to the conversation that we had in the last hour in reference to what Cignetti and Indiana's success is doing for other programs around college football in terms of the way they look at their head coaches. We'll hit that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Busy night basketball-wise here at South Carolina. Tonight at 7 o'clock here on 107.5 The Game. You can hear Carolina Calls with Coach Paris. Of course, his team coming off their victory the other night against Oklahoma, heading on the road, take on Texas A&M on Saturday. By the way, that tip will be at 3:30, which you can listen to right here on The Game. Women's basketball back in action tonight, taking on Oklahoma on the road. You can listen to that on our sister station, B106.7. Pregame at 7, tip-off at 7:30. Again, that on B106.7. Back in the 10 o'clock hour, we were discussing, it came off the conversation of Steve Spurrier going into the South Carolina Athletics Hall of Fame coming up in May, but I brought up the point of, is Spurrier South Carolina's Curt Cignetti, given the success the program's had before and during his tenure. And we got to the conversation about Cignetti and obviously what he's accomplished now with winning the national championship in Indiana. And you brought up a point that we didn't get a chance to expand on, Wes, of what does that win and the turnaround of Indiana mean for other programs around the country when it comes to the way they look at their own head coaches saying, hey, if that guy can do it, you should be able to too. And that goes for both active sitting head coaches, and Beamer's no exception to that, as well as guys going into their first year at new places like a Will Stein at a Kentucky, for example, a program that hasn't had a ton of success over the years football-wise. But they say, hey, if Indiana can do it, why can't you?
Yeah, and there were posts like this on the South Carolina message boards. I would dare say there were probably posts on every message board in the country of a program that has not had a recent national championship. Hey, if Indiana can do it, why can't we do it? And, it's a valid thought, but at the same time, guys, what Indiana just did is not normal. It's just not. I don't know how you're going to be able to replicate it. I know that everybody is going to be looking into Indiana's process. What do they do? People are going to try to hire their coaches. We just saw Tennessee stole their strength coach. I mean, literally is heading to Knoxville like the day after the national championship. And, their assistants are going to get bigger jobs, I'm sure. And, yeah, everybody's going to try to copy Indiana. But I still maintain, and Cignetti is awesome. He deserves all the credit in the world for what he did. I do think, this was a perfect storm in terms of how this thing played out. And guys, I also think one thing that's hurting coaches right now, two things, really. It's much like the NFL in that, okay, if there are expectations for you to win because of the roster that's being put together, then your window that they're going to give you, kind of that window where everybody's happy, is just going to be short. And so when schools are saying, hey, or the fans are saying, hey, our school is spending, $20 million to put together this roster, $25 million, $30 million. And at this point, if you're spending $20 million to put together a roster for 2026, you're behind, actually. You're behind. Yeah. You are. But the fan base is still, that's $20 million? What? $20 million. 10 years ago, you couldn't give the players a dime without getting in trouble. Yeah. So you could give them, a Dodge Charger, but you couldn't.
Allegedly.
Yeah, you couldn't legally do anything. So here's the thing. That with that becomes more pressure, I think. And, Chris, one of my favorite ones is, guys, the transfer portal is here. You can win faster than ever. Guess what? Everybody has access to the transfer portal. It's not just your team. Everybody has the chance to make their team better or to get worse by losing players via the transfer portal.
Well, and I think that was kind of one of the pieces of evolution, how we've looked at coaches in these past handful of years, because it used to be, prior to the portal and all that kind of stuff, you could realistically give a coach 4 to 5 years, because we would always say, oh, you got to wait till he gets his guys in there. You got to filter out the previous staff's guys, build up your recruiting class, build up your depth, and by year, 4 or 5, you get a real good idea of what that guy can be as a head coach because that entire team will be his up to that point. Well, now that you're in the portal era, especially in the past handful of years, there's no restrictions on who can go in and how many times they can transfer. You can flip a roster pretty quickly, so I think that window narrowed down to around 3 years, 2 years in some places in more extreme examples. And now you have an example of a guy doing that and quite literally taking a team from nothing to the mountaintop of college football. And I'm not saying that we're going to see a bunch of teams suddenly start firing coaches after a year, but I think that increased amount of pressure heightens at a lot more programs after year number 2 because of what Indiana did. And I go back to the example of Will Stein. And Mark Stoops had a couple of solid years there, winning 9 or so games, got into some good bowl games, but the expectation level of what Kentucky football is relatively low, where normally if Will Stein comes in there and consistently wins 7 to 8 games over the course of 4 to 5 years, he's probably not going to go anywhere. Yeah, the fan base may be disappointed that he didn't take him to the next level, but they might say, all right, we're just Kentucky. What can we expect? But now, if you go 7-5 in your first 2 years and are trending towards doing it again in year number 3, they might go ahead and pull the trigger and they say, hey, this guy's not our Signetti. We need to go back to the drawing board.
We still got Chris?
Chris is dealing with a leak, apparently.
Oh.
So just you and me.
Oh, okay.
I thought you saw the text message.
Nope. I was just...
You also didn't see my funny GIF in the text message.
I was fully locked into what's going on.
Well, I appreciate
with
that.
you and me right here on the show, Tyler, which apparently I should have looked at my text as well. But I hope it's not a bad leak. That does not sound good at all. Yeah, man, I think you're right. And I think so. Here's the thing, too. The more money that gets piped into this thing, the more, I mean, we're already seeing it. It just gets, the expectations change completely. And, I think, I even think to an extent, if there was all this change, so there's all this change, right?
Yep.
And then last year, Ohio State wins the thing. And it's very easy to be like, man, they talking about parity. Ohio State won the national title, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the bluest blue bloods you can possibly have.
And beat Notre Dame to do it.
Yes. 2 absolute traditional powers. But for Indiana, quite literally at a not-so-distant past, the worst team in college football history in terms of record, to win a national title and go undefeated doing it, 100% puts more pressure on everybody else. And when you start talking about $20 million, 25, 30, this, I'm going to do what Brian did here. This thing estimated as I was going through it that Texas A&M spent almost, spent over $34 million on their roster this past season, not this coming season. And they don't win a national title. I mean, they made the playoff. They got over their 8-game plateau, 8-win plateau. Mm-hmm. But the pressure to win is going to mount more than ever.
Well, look at Texas Tech. They are the poster child for what having a very wealthy donor, a literal billionaire in Cody Campbell, can do. And they got to the playoff, won the Big 12 championship, and got bounced pretty easily by Oregon in that game. But they were a part of quite literally building a roster that got you to the playoff. We'll see if they take the steps forward in the next couple of years with Joe McGuire, but they're another example, not to the extreme end of Indiana, of what just having an influx of money can do for a program.
So, no doubt. And you got to have a billionaire. You got to have a billionaire that wants to spend his hard-earned money on your football program and wants to make a difference. So, those folks are hard to find. Final segment, Tyler.
Okay.
On3 has put out their way too early top 100 players.
Ooh, all right.
Have you seen it yet?
I have not.
Okay.
I won't look at it.
How many guys do you think South Carolina has in the top 25?
In the top 25? 1?
Nope.
No?
3.
3. Oh, okay.
I don't want you to look.
All right, I won't look.
When we come back, I want to see if you can guess the 3.
All right, we'll hit that on the other side. Wrap up the hour. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. All right, welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Wes wrapping up the hour here on your Thursday on the game. You guys are getting really good at your radio-specific skills. At 9 o'clock, Jack is becoming good at transitioning into the Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up. And the past couple of days, you're hitting the teases going into the last break. This is neat.
Just
like this.
Just trying to, pull a little bit of extra weight over here for you, Tyler. I know you got to do teases and transitions all day, every day. So when I can pitch in and help out a little bit, I'm happy to do it. But I was, internally kind of proud of that one, to be completely honest.
That was a good one.
Have you thought about the question over the break here, man?
I have. So again, On3's put out their list of top 100 just players going into the season.
Way
right?
too early, top 100.
Way too early, top
from
100.
Clark Brooks, who is also SEC stat cat, but works for On3 as well.
Because On3's just snatched up everybody in college football media up to this point.
Yes.
Which is awesome. 3 Gamecocks in the top 25. I guessed one. I could go really cliche here and just say the big 3. Is that correct? I know at least a couple of them.
That is incorrect.
Incorrect. Okay.
Yes. So one of them will almost surely be a top 10 pick next year and is highest on the list, which would be
Dylan Stewart.
Correct.
Yes.
He is as high. He is number 3 in the country.
Okay.
And so here's the thing about Clark. He dives into this thing, man. He's not really so much worried about, hey, were the stats, the counting stats, you would say, were they what everybody expected them to be? He's like, even if he put down in quotes in terms of like a down year last year for Dylan. Traits are still there. The kid has 88 QB pressures in the last 2 seasons combined and has forced 6 fumbles, which is pretty insane. He says the Gamecock is an undeniable force and key chess piece in every game he plays. His tools and traits have him poised to be among the most impactful defenders in college football. So incredibly high praise. All right, so the other one at 22, knowing, Tyler, that Clark doesn't quite care about the stats and if you had a down year or not, but cares more about your traits and your impact, would be one of the other big 3.
It had to be Sellers, right?
Quarterback Lenore Sellers. He says, like a flower sprouting through cracks in cement, Lenore Sellers keeps progressing as a passer despite inhospitable conditions. His blockers keep letting him down. There's been 0 run game to take heat off of him, and his play callers have been milquetoast. He said, seeing the field better remains to be a major area of improvement for Sellers. Stats-wise, there maybe weren't signs of growth, but optimism lies within his tape. Sellers' potential as a field stretcher, backyard baller, and designed rusher make him one of the most dangerous offensive players in college football.
Never did I think we'd be talking about Mike Shula as milquetoast, but I appreciate the comparison.
Clark put some love into these.
He did. That's good. I like
very
that.
Very good.
And I think most Gamecock fans would read that and agree with most everything that he's saying there, because we know that
very fair.
That, upside potential is still very much there, and we hope that Kendall Briles kind of re-unlocks what we saw at the end of 2024. He was playing his best. So one more. It's not Nick Harbor.
It's not Nick Harbor, and it's in between Dylan and Lenore's, coming in at number 13.
Now, is this somebody that's returning or coming in from the portal?
That is a very key question, Tyler.
Okay.
Because this is somebody coming in from the portal.
Ooh. Interesting.
You could say it is the gem of their portal class.
Is it Jacarius Peak?
Ding, ding, ding.
Boom.
He says, this is Clark, number 13 overall. As a child of the air raid offense, I am a sucker for tremendous pass blockers, and that's exactly what Jacarius Peak is. His clean pass set rate, man, Clark and Wilhelms could just have, they have to just love each other's work, I feel like. Both overall and in true drop pack situations, crack the top 25 at the position. Considering his old offense liked to call a lot of drop back passes, that's all the more impressive. South Carolina has been the SEC's best offense at moving backwards.
Ouch, but true.
Yes. Failing to prevent pressure has stagnated the Shane Beamer era. Peak can help turn the tide. His presence could bring out the best version of number 22 on the list, Lenore Sellers.
I hope he's right.
That, by the way, puts, again, this is way too early. I'm trying to scroll up real quick. Let's see. Number 1, by the way, Jeremiah Smith.
Okay.
Number 2, Dante Moore. 3, Dylan. 4, Malachi Toney. 5, Colin Simmons from Texas. 6, Quan Lacey. 7, Ahmad Hardy. 8, Carter Smith, who is an offensive lineman from Indiana. So 1, I know we're out of time. There's only 1 offensive lineman ahead of Peak in the entire country, according to one Clark Brooks.
Sounds good. Now, are those the only Gamecocks in the top 100?
Those are the only Gamecocks in the top 100.
Okay, well, hey, 3 in the top 25. That ain't too bad. We'll maybe dive into this a little bit more coming up tomorrow as we wrap up the week. Halftime show up next here on your Thursday on the Game.